Hey everyone, it's Elisha, and this is the moment where I reveal to you that I'm like really an old lady stuck in a 34-year-old mom's body. Because earlier this week I decided, oh yay, Babysitter's Club. It came out July 3rd on Netflix, and thought, harkening back to my days as a kid, reading the Babysitter's Club, wishing I lived in Stony Brook, I wanted to watch it with our girls. We currently have a 10-and-a-half-year-old niece with us, almost 7-year-old, and almost 3-year-old, and let's be honest, and an almost 1-year-old. The 1-year-old doesn't really pay attention to TV. In fact, the almost 3-year-old doesn't really either. And every single time the TV's on, she isn't really paying attention. And we all know if you have siblings and stuff, you end up watching shows that I guess are a little more mature, or she watches things that aren't really toddler geared. And sometimes she's okay with that. Sometimes she just plays and doesn't really pay attention. So the other night, I just decided to start watching an episode of the Babysitter's Club. I've finished almost the entire season, more so for research and not with our girls, because just in episode 1 alone, I was shocked at how much, I guess you could say, wokeness and feminist mantra were just brilliantly, actually, interwoven in with the script. And this is something that, of course, the late, great Andrew Breitbart used to talk about this all the time. People in the conservative movement talk about this all the time, that politics is so downstream from culture. And culture is where, the left is really winning the hearts and minds, and they're starting it younger and younger and younger. So we're watching episode 1, and the girls didn't have too many questions, but just basic things like Claudia, the artist that's super cool and super chick. She seriously looks like a character out of Gossip Girl, which I used to religiously watch when I lived in New York City and was single. I mean, the child has like glitter makeup on all the time, and personally I have issues with that. There's references to like a new girl potentially having an eating disorder. There's of course references to boys, and then there's a reference to Christy, the main character, how her dad is absent. Now, I know and love people in our family and our friend group that do have absent fathers or deceased fathers or non-existent, I guess you could call them deadbeat dads if they're not around and taking care of their children. But I just felt like it was really heavy subject matter to have in something that is rated TVG. So then I decided to go look at the ratings, and sure enough, TVG is supposed to be acceptable and like not have any sexualization references or inappropriate things, and safe for the entire family and all age groups. Well, something else that ended up, it just kind of clinched me not ever wanting to watch this again with our girls, was when Claudia, the artist, decides she's working on something at the first meeting of the Babysitter's Club, and Christy, whose character, by the way, is super disrespectful of her mom and like a self-proclaimed feminist, with some interwoven comments in there as well. She says, oh, what are you working on? To which a 12-year-old girl says, a sculpture about menstruation. I've known that my mom was very open with us. Oftentimes in speeches, I talk about how my family was a very odd Bible Belt family because we did talk about sex, religion, and politics, but it was always in a very appropriate, safe setting, and then, of course, from an evangelical Christian biblical perspective. And I think that I was just kind of floored that here's a 12-year-old girl who's dressed like a character from Gossip Girl, who's wearing glitter eye makeup that's better than I could ever apply for myself. Hence the reason why I'm makeup free on a Sunday afternoon. And she's sculpting something about menstruation in something that is rated TVG that's supposed to be safe for viewing for the entire family. So that was kind of the final straw. I mean, the RBG references and even crushes on boys, I can kind of get 12-year-old girls talking about. I remember being a 12-year-old girl. I remember wanting to be a babysitter from the Babysitter's Club. But there was just too much happening for me to feel comfortable with a 10-and-a-half-year-old, an almost 7-year-old, and an almost 3-year-old watching this show again. Since then, like I said, I've almost finished the entire season. I'm only 2 episodes left. It's the ones where they go to camp. And as I watch, I am more astonished over and over and over again at all of the references that are occurring. Like in episode 2, there's references to The Handmaid's Tale. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what parent would let their 12-year-old watch Handmaid's Tale? Alicia Silverstone, of course, with Clueless fame, is casted as Christy's mom. And Christy is the one, she's the only daughter, she has 3 brothers, and her idea comes after she realizes that she has to babysit her baby brother, and what if there were this club? Even in episode 2, this is my conservative capitalist part coming out, there's high school girls who start the Babysitters Agency to compete with the Babysitters Club, and there's totally references to the free market system and healthy capitalistic competition that is viewed in a negative light, because the bad girls who ditch the kids on the side of the street and hang out with their boyfriends instead of watching them appropriately are the high schoolers who are viewed as like the evil rich capitalists that are coming down on the little guy that is the Babysitters Club, not the Babysitters Agency. I am doing this live because it was just, as I watched this and was chatting with friends and thinking about, you know, as a parent, it's kind of scary to think about the conversations we're going to have. In fact, we're going to do a Lady Brains episode soon, I think, about like the talk and the talks that we had with our parents and how we're going to have those with our girls one day. Because, of course, Emily Zanotti is expecting a girl. Bethany Mandel has 2 beautiful girls. Mary Catherine Ham has 2 beautiful girls. We have 4 girls. And I think that we all need to be very aware of not just how to have these conversations with our kids in the safe confines of our home, but understanding that other people are going to be talking to them about it. And now even entertainment that is supposed to be viewed as safe and friendly for the entire family is addressing stuff like this. So after episode 1, I was just like, oh, we're not going to watch this anymore. I actually didn't even mention it because I didn't want to shine a light on it. Our niece a couple days later said, oh, can we watch that show again? And I said, no, I think it's too old for you guys. I removed it from the list, I think, and I'm going to try to like figure out how to remove it from the history so the continue watching doesn't pop up again, and move on to like other things. Like I'll go back to having them watch Pocoyo. And it's funny because my husband and I even let our oldest watch the Marvel movies during quarantine. There were scenes that we fast forwarded, but I thought it's so crazy to me that I had to answer less questions about action and violence and sex and gender roles and stuff watching the Marvel movies with my almost 7-year-old than I did watching this one episode of the Babysitters Club with them. Adele Scalia on Twitter rightfully said, she's like, whoa, they're way more woke than I remember from the 90s. And it continues. I think really the episode that was the most obviously glaring in its leftist agenda was episode 4, in which we meet a new character, Dawn, whose mom and her moved back to Stony Brook after a divorce, and she tells one of the characters, I think it was Mary Beth, that, sorry, I'm looking up the name, yeah, Marianne, sorry, not Mary Beth, that her parents got a divorce because her dad came out, and that the mom and the dad had always known that the dad was gay, but they just decided to ignore it for a very long time. I was like, okay, fine. She's from LA, so she's like this cool character that's eating kale salad and drinking her green juice. And I was just astonished that that just came out in casual conversation amongst 12-year-olds. I'm not naive enough to think that 7th graders aren't having conversations about things that are happening and that they're seeing. And I'm sure many of them know people within the LGBTQ community. But once again, with the TVG rating, I don't want to have to be having a conversation with my almost 7-year-old about LGBTQ issues, which leads me to even more. I think that this was brilliantly casted. I think it's very cleverly written, and it's written with the intention of putting in these messages in there to make them seem mainstream and nice and fun and fair and equitable. And this is what Hollywood does pretty well, right? I think Alicia Silverstone was casted because they want people in their 30s like me that read The Babysitters Club and is potentially excited to watch it with their children, who are friends of her, early career, and who doesn't love Clueless, as if, to be entertained by it as well. And there are things that are written for children, and there are things that are written for adults within the show. The guy that plays, I think, Sean from The Good Place, who runs The Bad Place, is casted as Marianne's dad, and he does a good job in that role. Her mom died, and that's part of the themes as well. So like there are some things that I think are applicable to real life and maybe real viewers, and then there's other things that just are really out there that the average American isn't going to encounter or have to deal with, and they sprinkle them in a lot. So also in episode 4, something that has been written about and why I referenced the casting is that one of the casting directors admitted that once she read a story about a transgendered girl in Texas, Austin, Texas specifically, she thought, I want to include that character or a character like her in season 1 of The Babysitter's Club. And this 9-year-old actress plays a transgender child on episode 4, in which Marianne kind of discovers it's her arc of going from shy girl to speaking out and trying to dress herself and not do braids, and in which they kind of write it where she sticks up for this kid. And it really hurt my heart, because I look at 9-year-old children that are experiencing maybe some gender confusion, and you see parents, of course, that often politicize this. I think that, and then it is explained by Dawn, the hippy dippy girl from LA with the gay dad whose parents got divorced, to Marianne, as if it's just something like, if you know you're right-handed and someone tells you to use your left hand. Except, as I've talked about in a YF Truth Straight Up video, and as I've talked about in other videos as well, gender is not just right or left hand issue. There are things other than how we feel that have to do with our gender. There are hormones, there are body parts, there are a lot of other things that scientifically make us who we are. And of course, I believe that that's how God created us to be. Nowhere in this so far has there been any form of religion or religious principle. And of course not, because that cannot be highlighted in any positive way, of course, by Hollywood or the left. And so episode 4, I think, has been the most woke so far. There were some other things that came up too, like, of course, Claudia's family has a history in the United States, and her Mimi gets sick. We have a Mimi in our house, and they talk about how Mimi and her family were horrifically, put in an internment camp. I'm a huge history buff. I've always been a history buff, and I really, when I was a kid, I remember soaking up World War II and Civil War history specifically. But even then, I think in a very kind of not watered down way, but a kid-friendly way. And the older sister makes a comment to her little sister about the internment camps and says, well, the American government is like still doing that today. To which we could say is not the case. And of course, there was no like Trump mention or no Obama mention, but it was just kind of this perspective of, once again, the politics leaking into this show and a really mature subject matter. I would probably discuss that with our 10-and-a-half-year-old niece. I don't know that my 7-year-old would understand that. My 7-year-old's only understanding of World War II at this point is from watching The Sound of Music and calling it like the bad guys. Like, she knows that Nazis are bad guys from going and watching it at the Hollywood Bowl Live or watching it here at home and having brief discussions with her about how the Nazis were bad guys, but not the in-depth understanding of that, because she's 7. She doesn't understand. And so once again, sorry for this rant. I just felt like I need to get all this out there. There's a lot of stuff in this show that is really mature subject matter. And I think trying to over mature and over sexualize 12-year-old girls. I get that some people have crushes early. I get that some people like to wear makeup early. I didn't wear makeup till I moved to New York City and was 18. I'm still learning how to do it. Thank God for Jess for that. And I just think that it has to be something as parents that it made me aware of. Just because something has a TVG rating doesn't mean I can just click it on and watch it with the girls, or click it on and have them watch while I go do something or have a drink or hang out with my husband. I have to be much more vigilant. I have to be much more aware. But also, I really want to encourage you guys to encourage the people that you know that are creative and in the arts. And I'm definitely of the mindset that you don't have to create like conservative media or Christian media. I think we just need to create good content and clean content and, like, no pun intended, like safe content for the entire family to watch and be entertained. I think that Disney does this well and has typically done this well for a very long time. We watched Hamilton, and that it's so entertaining and good, and I'm getting books for the girls on Alexander Hamilton and Jefferson and Lafayette, because now they're kind of interested in that. But even in that, we had to be very careful. There are some PG-13 references in Hamilton. We had to explain like a duel and how things have changed and how society has changed and how we don't enslave people anymore. And so I just want to encourage you guys, like, if you are a creative person, if you are an editor or videographer or photographer or model or actress or whatever, look for that good content. Look for that content that inspires you, that is uplifting, that can encourage people, that is funny and entertaining, and even like historical fiction in nature. Just, I think that we need to be more aware and we need to be more vigilant of everything that is out there and everything that is happening. And that's my end rant for now. I'm going to throw on my swimsuit and go swim with the girls, and I hope you guys are great. And I might do this every Sunday. I don't know. Just ask me questions. Let me know what you think. Okay.